Insperity presents the Small Business Advocate Show with Jim Blasingame, brought to you by FedEx, CareerBuilder.com, and Palo Alto Software. This is a copyrighted production of Small Business Network, Inc., all rights reserved.
Welcome back. It's 12 after the hour. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'm Jim Blasingame, and you're listening to the Small Business Advocate Show. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad Bill Treasurer is with us, ladies and gentlemen. Bill is an old friend, a longtime member of our Brain Trust. He's the founder and the Chief Encouragement Officer at Giant Leap Consulting, which is an organization that helps you and me to understand, to define, to identify, and help us understand the importance of courage. He's written a number of books on this topic, including his last one, which is Courage Goes to Work. And he's our good friend, Bill Treasurer. Welcome back to the show.
Jim, always great to be with you.
It's good to have you back. I was telling the audience, Bill, before you got here, when I was telling them you were going to come, that that a leader without courage is really ineffective. In fact, I don't know how you could actually call yourself a leader if you don't have if you don't have courage, sort of in abundance, or at least be able to find courage, because a leader has to make decisions that aren't always popular, and you have to have the courage to you have to have the courage of your convictions. You have to have the courage to deal with that kind of pushback, and the courage to incorporate other ideas into your ideas, so to make sure that you're on the right track. What do you think?
I absolutely think so. To be a leader means to render judgments, to make decisions that some people, sometimes a lot of people, are going to disagree with. And in order to be able to sort of withstand that scrutiny and evaluation and pushback, you've got to have backbone, and that means being courageous. Aristotle said that courage is the first virtue. Because it makes all the other virtues possible.
Right.
And if that's true outside of work, then it's true inside of work as well. Because without courage, you don't have concepts like leadership. You don't have concepts like innovation, which means to come up with groundbreaking but tradition-defying ideas.
Right.
You can't be a great salesperson if you're not willing to knock on hundreds of doors in the face of rejection over and over and over. So courage informs things and shapes things and strengthens things like leadership and innovation and sales. It's central to business. If Aristotle said it's the first virtue outside of business, I'm saying it's the first virtue of business.
Well, what would you think if I said courage is faith as a verb?
Wow, I've never heard it put that way.
Well, I just came up with that, but maybe it should never be said again. But I guess what I'm getting at is, when as you were talking about this, as you were saying what you were saying, the word faith kept popping up to me. Faith in myself, faith in the organization, faith in the people around me, faith in the goals that we have, faith in, things like that. And if you have that kind of faith, you can't put it to use unless you have the courage to make it happen.
I think that it is faith in action. Courage is constituted by a number of things. One of them centrally would be faith, partly because courage is about pushing out, contending with, walking through fear, and so is faith. Courage is also partly about risk, the assumption of risk and vulnerability, exposure. It's about will and willpower. Mm-hmm. So C.S. Lewis said that courage is not just a virtue, it's the form of all virtues taken to the testing point. And I think that's kind of an interesting notion. And the idea of faith, too, if you look at any big religion, that centrally, the central message would almost always come down to driving out fear. Mm-hmm. To put something else inside of you that pushes fear out, because it's part of the human condition to contend with fear.
Right.
And I think you'd agree, that one of the great bastions of fear is the American workplace. There's a lot of anxiety
especially in the last 2 years. In my long career, Bill, I've never seen so much anxiety in the workplace as there is right now as I move around the country and talk to people and see what's going on.
These are tremendously unsettling times, and there's a great deal of uncertainty. And typically when there is uncertainty in any system, people start providing safety-seeking behavior, which is almost sort of anti-courage behavior. I understand it at an intellectual level. On the other hand, the challenge with that is if we ever expect to get out of this economic trough, it's not going to be, hunkering down underneath our desk trying to play it safe. It's going to be,
because courage takes creativity. Courage is also creativity in action, isn't it? I mean, it is, as you said, and when you're fearful, you're not going to be creative. You're not going to take a chance. You're not going to take risks, and it's all part of the same thing, and it's all associated with maybe I haven't lost my job, but my next door neighbor has, and so am I next. And of course I know the employment thing has settled down an awful lot, but there's still a lot of folks out of work, and that puts an extra degree of difficulty in this whole thing we're talking about. So how do we get out of this? How do we deal with this, Bill?
Well, let me just add one additional thing to that. When there is this pressure, this economic pressure, this great deal of uncertainty, this sort of intensity, what happens sometimes is that our leaders don't respond like leaders. They don't respond with confidence and conviction and composure, but instead start squeezing people and start using threats because they're trying to drive more sales to their business when it's not so easy to do, and they think it becomes the people's fault versus the economic conditions' fault, or somehow that we can will our way out of it. So a lot of it has to do with the leaders and what kind of tone they're setting, what kind of climate they're setting in their workplace, so that they create an expectation that people should extend themselves and seek opportunity versus seeking safety. So there's, just think of all the ideas, think of all the examples of where courage is needed in the workplace. Selling an idea or making a budget request of senior executives. Informing a key customer about a major mistake you made. Taking on a big, hairy project where other people have failed. Delegating a significant or consequential task to an employee, giving a presentation to your boss's boss, going through a 360-degree feedback. They're literally, all of the examples of where courage is needed in the workplace is inexhaustible. The challenge is that even despite all of these examples where it's needed, it's still often avoided. So one of the things I think becomes extra necessary, if you will, is the behavior of leaders and the tone that they're setting. And there are four major things that I think leaders need to attend to in order to create a condition that.
And when we come back after these messages, we're going to get you to tell us what those four are. Quick break, folks. 20 after, right back with Bill Treasurer. His new book is called Courage Goes to Work. It's a good one, too. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Where it goes. Gonna climb a mountain.
Insperity presents the Small Business Advocate Show with Jim Blasingame, brought to you by FedEx, CareerBuilder.com, and Palo Alto Software. This is a copyrighted production of Small Business Network, Inc., intended for the private use of our audience. Except as otherwise provided by copyright law, all other copying, redistribution, or publication without prior written consent is prohibited. All rights reserved. Prohibited. All rights reserved. Prohibited. All rights